The morning sun glared down over Dusty Creek, a small frontier town that baked under the relentless Arizona heat. The air shimmered above the dirt road, carrying the mixed scent of horse sweat, tobacco, and roasting corn. Wagons crowded the main street, filled with burlap sacks of grain, hay bales, and wooden crates marked trade goods. Men in wide-brimmed hats haggled loudly, their voices blending into the rough music of a marketplace built on desperation and survival. Caleb Turner reined in his horse, Dusty, beside the trading post. His shirt clung to his back with sweat, and his hat cast a shadow over sharp, sunburnt features. He wasn't a man who enjoyed towns. He preferred open plains and quiet mornings, but the drought had been merciless this year. His ranch needed grain, or his cattle would starve before winter. He swung off his horse, checked his pocket, and felt the few silver coins he'd scraped together from selling old tools and saddles. It wasn't much, but it had to be enough. As he crossed the market yard, a commotion rose from the far side. Men were shouting, laughing crudely. Curiosity drew him closer. When he reached the corral, his stomach turned cold. Inside stood a young Apache woman, wrists bound with coarse rope, her dark hair tangled, her chin lifted in quiet defiance. An auctioneer stood on a crate, waving his hat. "Captured Apache widow," he barked. "Strong worker, half-tamed, speaks a bit of English." "Let's start the bidding," the crowd jeered. One man offered the price of a mule, another the cost of a sack of grain. Caleb's fist clenched. He had seen enough cruelty in the war, enough broken souls sold or traded like beasts. He turned to leave, but the woman flinched when the auctioneer raised a whip to make her stand straighter. Something inside him snapped. Before he realized what he was doing, Caleb's voice cut through the noise. "I'll take her." The crowd fell silent. The auctioneer grinned. "Sold, to the rancher with the bleeding heart." He slammed the gavel down. As the rope was cut and the woman looked up, her eyes met Caleb's, deep wounded and fierce. He didn't know her story yet, but in that moment, Caleb Turner had bought more than he bargained for. He had bought fate itself. The sun was sinking low when Caleb and the Apache woman rode out of Dusty Creek, leaving behind the noise and dust of the marketplace. The world stretched wide and empty ahead of them, rolling desert hills, streaked with the gold and red of the setting sun. The wind carried the scent of mesquite and dry earth, and the rhythmic clop of their horses' hooves echoed in the silence. The woman rode behind him on the second horse he'd borrowed from the stable master. Her posture was straight, proud despite exhaustion. Her wrists were free now, but her eyes stayed sharp, watchful. Caleb glanced back a few times, unsure how to speak to her. He'd faced outlaws and soldiers without flinching, yet somehow this woman's silence unsettled him. "You must be thirsty," he said finally, reaching into his saddlebag and offering his canteen. She hesitated, her gaze flickering from his hand to his face, as if judging whether it was a trick. Then she took it, drank a few sips, and handed it back without a word. "What's your name?" Caleb asked. She looked at him for the first time. "Tala," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "It means wolf." "Fitting," he murmured. "You've got the eyes of one." Tala said nothing, but the faintest hint of curiosity crossed her face. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the desert in shades of violet and silver. They reached the small valley where Caleb's ranch lay nestled. Between rocky ridges, a few tired cattle grazed near the creek, and smoke curled from the chimney of the weathered log cabin. He helped Tala dismount. "This ain't much, but it's home," he said. "You can rest here tonight. You're free to leave whenever you want." Tala turned slowly, her gaze sweeping across the empty land. "No one waits for me," she whispered. "I will work." Caleb nodded, unsure what to say. He fetched a blanket and handed it to her. For a moment their fingers brushed me, and something passed between them, a fragile spark of trust. That night, as the desert wind whispered outside and coyotes called in the distance, Caleb realized that his quiet ranch no longer felt empty. He didn't understand why, but the presence of the Apache widow filled the silence with something alive, something he hadn't felt in years. It began with a distant rumble, low and deep, rolling across the valley like a growl from the mountains. Caleb stepped onto the porch, squinting toward the horizon. Thick clouds were gathering, bruised purple and gray, and the wind carried the metallic scent of rain. After weeks of drought, a storm should have been a blessing. But this one looked angry. "Storm's coming fast," he muttered, pulling on his coat. He turned to Tala, who was mending a torn saddle strap near the barn. "Get inside. I'll bring the herd in before the creek floods." But Tala was already on her feet. "I'll help," she said. Caleb frowned. "No, you'll get hurt out there. It's too rough." She met his eyes, unflinching. "I am not afraid of storms." A moment later, they were both out in the open, fighting the rising wind. Lightning forked across the sky and thunder cracked so loud it shook the ground. The cattle bellowed, panicked, scattering toward the canyon. Caleb shouted orders that were lost in the roar of the storm. Tala ran beside him, her long hair plastered to her face, her hand steady as she helped swing the gate shut. A flying branch cut across Caleb's hand, drawing blood. He winced, but Tala grabbed his wrist, steadying him as they forced the gate closed together. Rain drenched them both, but the herd was safe. When they finally stumbled into the barn for shelter, they were soaked and shivering. The storm roared outside like a living beast. Tala knelt beside the lantern light, took his injured hand gently, and wrapped it with a strip torn from her shawl. Her touch was careful, tender. Caleb watched her face in the flickering light, strong, proud yet marked by deep sorrow. "Tala," he said softly, "how did they catch you?" She was silent for a long moment. Then her voice trembled with restrained pain. "Soldiers came. They said our land was theirs. My husband fought. They killed him. I ran, but they found me." Caleb's throat tightened. "I was a soldier once," he confessed, his voice breaking. "I thought I was fighting for peace, but I see now what we took from you." Tala looked at him then, truly looked. The firelight reflected in her eyes, full of both grief and understanding. She reached out, her fingers brushing his cheek. Outside, the storm began to fade, but inside the barn, a different kind of storm, one of guilt, forgiveness, and fragile connection, and had just begun to calm. Weeks turned into months, and life on the ranch found a new rhythm. The storm had passed, but its memory lingered, not of fear, but of change. Each morning, Tala rose before sunrise, feeding the horses and lighting the fire. Caleb would find her humming softly in her native tongue, her voice blending with the wind that swept across the plains. The sound brought peace to him in a way he hadn't known since before the war. They worked side by side, was mending fences, tending to cattle, repairing the barn roof. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't. Words weren't needed. Slowly, a fragile trust grew between them. Caleb saw how her eyes softened when she looked at the open desert, how she touched the earth like it was sacred. Tala began to smile again, a quiet, hesitant smile that made the lonely ranch feel alive. One golden afternoon, as Caleb repaired a water trough, a cloud of dust appeared on the horizon. Riders. His heart sank. Trouble had a way of finding peace too easily. He walked to the gate, hand resting on the grip of his revolver. 3 men rode up, rough-faced bounty hunters with rifles strapped across their saddles. "Afternoon, mister," the lead one said, spitting tobacco. "Word is an Apache woman's been seen working this ranch. She's government property. We're here to take her back." Caleb's blood ran cold. Tala stepped out of the barn, standing tall despite the fear flickering in her eyes. The bounty hunter smirked. "There she is." Caleb's voice came out calm but deadly. "She's not yours to take." "She's not yours either," the man sneered. "Unless you married her, cowboy." Caleb's revolver was out in a blink, steady as stone. "That's right," he said. "She's my wife now. And if you reach for her, you'll find out what kind of husband I am." The men hesitated, sizing him up, then spat curses and rode off, disappearing into the dust. When silence returned, Tala looked at Caleb, her voice trembling. "Why did you say that?" He met her gaze. "Because maybe it should be true." For a long moment she said nothing. Then slowly a tear rolled down her cheek, not of sorrow but of release. She smiled softly and whispered, "Then let it be." As the sun set over the endless desert, 2 lost souls found a new beginning, not born of war or purchase, but of understanding, courage, and something that finally felt like love.